Hey guys, it's Tyler from Stark here, and we are going to talk about deadlifting. The deadlift is one of the most beneficial exercises for the lower body, and really it's actually a full body exercise when you think about all the components of it. We're going to talk about some of the techniques you need to use when deadlifting, as well as some of the common errors we see. And I'm also going to give you a couple other variations of the exercise to try once you've mastered the basics. Starting with the proper technique for a deadlift, the first thing you need to think about is the setup. The first thing you need is feet hip distance apart, and then you're going to set up with the bar directly over the middle of your feet so that you have a mostly vertical shin angle. Now there's a little bit of variation with the torso, arm, and shin angle. You should see some sort of a triangle, but for the most part the shins should be primarily vertical, the torso should be at a slight angle, and the arms should be straight up and down with the shoulders directly above the bar. The other thing you need to do is pack your shoulders. So you want to twist your arms almost as if you're bending the bar in half. And you want to keep the shoulders down and back, almost like you're carrying a magazine underneath your arm. Now once you're in the proper setup position, the next thing to do is the actual lift. The first and primary thing is you want a straight bar path. The bar should move straight up and down above the middle of the feet without deviating forward and backwards. The next thing is you want to focus on bringing the hips forward. Too often people think about lifting the bar up, but it's really about bringing your hips forward to meet the bar. Once you're at the top of the lift, the next part is lowering it. The bar should go down the same way it came up, and you should break initially from the hips. Now that you've seen the basics of the deadlift, I'm going to talk about the top 3 most common errors we see when people actually start deadlifting. The first is having the bar too far in front of them. As I mentioned, the bar should be lined up over the middle of the foot, but oftentimes people set up with the bar kind of over the toes. And the bar is too far away from the body, which is going to make it hard to keep a straight bar path, as well as put more pressure on the low back. The second error I see is taking too much of a squatted position in the deadlift. People think that because you want to protect your low back, you need to be more upright. But the problem is that when you're in a squatted position, the knees come too far forward of the bar, and it makes it hard to maintain a vertical bar path. So when deadlifting, don't be in too much of a squatted position and actually start with the hips slightly more elevated. The third and final error I see most often has to do with neck position. Oftentimes we see people either tucking or lifting their chin because they're looking at certain places on the wall, ceiling, or floor. The most important thing to remember is to keep a neutral neck position. The head should follow the body, and depending on at what point you are in the lift, your chin and eyes should be focused on different points in the room. Now that you've got the basics of the deadlift, I want to talk about 3 variations of the deadlift: the sumo deadlift, the snatch grip deadlift, and the kettlebell deadlift. With a sumo deadlift, you're going to take a wider and toed out stance. The shins are going to still primarily be vertical, but because of the wide stance, you're going to recruit the adductors into the lift. Everything else about the sumo deadlift is pretty similar to the regular deadlift, including the angle of the torso, shoulders, and arms. But one is not better than the other. I recommend doing the sumo deadlift as well as the regular deadlift as part of your workout program. The next variation is the snatch grip deadlift. This is similar to the standard deadlift, but with a much wider grip. One of the reasons for doing this exercise is that when you take the grip out wider, it actually increases the depth of the range of motion for the deadlift. So this is a much more advanced version of the deadlift, and you get a greater range of motion when training the snatch grip deadlift. The last variation is actually the most basic and where I generally start people who are new to deadlifting. That's the kettlebell deadlift. All of the components of the kettlebell deadlift are similar to the regular deadlift, including the position of the kettlebell in relationship to the foot, the vertical path of the weight, and the angles of the torso, shins, and arm. The reason the kettlebell is a good place to start is because the kettlebell is often lighter and much smaller than the barbell, and is much more manageable for people who don't have as much experience with lifting weights. So now that you know the basics of the deadlift, what errors to avoid, and a couple variations to get you started, let's get out there and lift some weight.